Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very good, and you?
I'm good, good. How is Bahrain so far?
Well, I must say pretty impressive for the airport, because that's pretty much all I saw since I arrived. No. I mean, it's quite an impressive setup. I mean, you can see that there's been a lot. I mean, historically, Jewelry Arabia is the biggest fair in the region. Obviously, there's been other fairs coming up in the last few years, which challenge with different concepts. But in terms of size, I guess it's by far the biggest. And this new location, I mean, the quality of the location is very
Compared
good.
To the previous ones,
the previous one was a bit challenging. But from what I've seen, some of the big brands have, as they like to do, they architectured the place.
Yeah.
But I think as a visitor, it's actually very interesting.
Enjoying it. That's great. I just told you that this is your first interview with Timekeeper.
True.
And unfortunately, it's going to be short because of the setup and everything. But I want to go back to your history. We had a nice visit together to Russia. We talked a lot about history, stories, especially in our region. I want to talk about something that's very interesting. And it was one of the brands that I paid attention during my early days in loving watches and such, which is Romain Jérôme, and then became RJ. Tell us the part you played in that brand.
Well, it's been actually quite a long part. I would say probably the one who stayed the longest. I started back in early 2010, actually 1st of January 2010. Back then, it's an interesting story because RJ started in 2004. But they started with mechanical golf watches. Now, everybody who knows about golf and mechanical watches, a bit challenging, especially when it's a very complex mechanism and that's fragile. It just doesn't work. And then they restarted it in 2006, I would say. I think it was 2006 to May 2006, summer 2006. And with this, I found extremely interesting concept of saying, okay, we don't have any history, especially for me. I mean, I built Jackie, which is a very traditional historical brand, going back to the roots of the brand. But they built this brand with this idea of saying, look, we don't have history. We're a modern company, but somehow history is a very strong emotional driver. So how can we do history if we don't have history? And then came this concept of, well, let's just put the history in the watch. With this idea of DNA, of famous legends. And I mean, everybody remembers the buzz of the Titanic, which was a humongous buzz, but not everywhere. The brand was up there. I mean, it really became an actor in this ecosystem. But the problem obviously was that when you do provocation, I think provocation is fundamental. I started my career in Swatch Group, and Swatch is provocation, but it's positive provocation. And what I inherited in RJ was a bit of a, duo, sometimes a bit negative provocation with this Titanic that some people associated with something negative, others positive. So I came in with this idea to say, okay, this is cool. This brand has no boundaries. There is no limit. You can do whatever you want. It's like a creative. For me, it was like canvas, canvas and colors. And then I could just split colors all over the place. And I really liked that. But my idea was to say, okay, I want to move into something more positive, but keeping this kind of DNA, legends and icons. And it's actually been quite a ride. I mean, I really enjoyed it. When the first product I brought out was the Volcano, which was today
relevant to the time. That's one of the things.
Well, it was very, very. It's probably the most daring thing I did in my career, and I've done a few things because I started in this company early 2010, and everybody was like, "Oh, Titanic, what's next?"
Yeah.
Oh, the former CEO told us this and that and this and that and this and that. And it's like, okay, everything is lined up. The pyramids, the Great Wall of China, everything, the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, okay, everybody expects already what is to come, so I got to bring out something unexpected. And then this volcano goes up, and I go like, yeah, yalla, that's it. That's
Do you
destiny.
know how to pronounce the name?
I know it's still Elia Fiateyökult.
Yeah.
And So this was on a Friday. I always remember it was the Friday. It was like Wednesday the volcano went up, and by Friday I said we should do a watch with this. And I said, okay, but I have nothing, no material, no connection. I don't know who to talk to. Iceland is a beautiful country, but I don't have connections, even though I went on a vacation there. So I said, okay, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we sell the watch. Let's just pretend we have it. So we did on Photoshop over the weekend. It's a true story. In like 3-4 hours, we just Photoshopped the watch. Okay. And by the way, if you look at the first picture, you see 3 hands, center, second. Because we didn't even know we don't have movements with center second. Doesn't matter. And then the volcano was really like a Photoshop of a volcano. And then we said, okay, this is cool. People will talk about it, but we don't have anything, so we don't want to sell it. So how can we create buzz and then not sell it? Okay, once there's a second, this is a unique piece, okay, first. And then we do a price that nobody was willing to pay. So we said, okay, what's the most expensive steel watch on the market? And it was like a 22 or 23,000 back then, 2-hand steel watch. And said we double the price. So it is a 50,000. Okay, so that was the idea. And we did the press kit and everything. And on the Monday, we launched the watch. On back then, I mean, 2010 wasn't that much of a, but we had a huge buzz. Why? Because it was the first time everybody was talking about this volcano every day, and it was only images about the volcano, the country, the airlines, the airports, and suddenly there was something new, and all the media picked it up. They were on front covers of pretty much half of the European newspapers. We went into the TV show, the main TV shows in tons of countries.
Not paid.
Nothing. I mean, it was like, I don't know how much you could value it today, but the buzz was immense, and then orders came in, and I'm like 1, 2, 3, and it just accelerated, and we were just looking at this thing and saying, yep, now we have a problem, but a good one. And I think by the end of first 3 days, back then it took also a bit longer for the orders, we maybe had 200 pieces on order at 50,000.
Wow.
With nothing. And we said, okay, well, okay, we now do what we intended to do. We just say, okay, the watch has been sold. Thank you for your interest. We have something else if you want. Anyway, and then after 3-4 days, we got an email from the Icelandic Volcanic Institute saying, oh, we saw this watch. This is cool. Somebody writes about something positive. Can we help you?
Yeah.
Can we provide you with something? And I said, oh, yeah, bring us the material. Can you get us a volcanic stone? Yeah, sure, we can do that. And we organized over email a helicopter expedition to the volcano, picking up dust and cold stone, and they sent it everything by FedEx to us, and then we started working. And I think it was March, yes, and by probably July, we started to deliver the first pieces. Super quick. And we obviously had problems because it was a Photoshop. So how do you make a watch look like a volcanic Photoshop? Yeah. So we had to hand paint. It was a big mess, but it was a cool product. And we ended up selling 3 editions of 100. We decreased the price to 25 because we thought it was a bit abusive to sell them at 50. But, and then...
It's more expensive than any steel in the market.
Still. And it was a huge success. And that just showed me that we can do innovative, creative, different thing, daring things, but with something positive, because the volcano was nothing negative. There was no, I would say there was nothing with a catastrophe or whatever. And some cultures, specifically Asian cultures, they're sensitive to this karma idea. And so I said, okay, we got to do more positive things. And then the next thing I wanted to do was video game. Actually, not video games.
Things. Pac-Man, you did. I still remember the.
Yeah, but that was also the story is actually, it's going to be long, but the story is also very interesting because initially I didn't want to do video games. Initially, I wanted to do street art. Okay, and there was this street artist called Invader, which did this mosaic, and I said, this is cool. I want to do that on a watch. Okay, so I do this on a watch, and then, I showed this around, and there was one lawyer in the team, and he said, but you have the rights for that? And I said, no. Yeah, but this is there's rights, this belongs to Taito. Yeah. Well, back then, nobody knew who Taito was, but anyway, there's rights. And I said, yeah, but the artist, yeah, but he's an artist. You're a brand. I said, oh no, I want to be an artist. But anyway, cut the long story short, I understood I have to have the rights. And I contacted Taito and I said, I would like to have a license. And I said, for how many hundred thousands of watches? I said, no, like for 80, like actually 78 because the founding year. I said, so they said, no, we don't do for this little. But I said, no, but it's going to be very expensive. And I said, like, expensive like what, $200, $300? And I said, no, like, expensive like 20,000.
Yeah.
I said, okay, come, we don't understand. Come and present. So I went to London because the rights were run with a company in London. And I was in this big boardroom with like 10 lawyers around the table. And I tried to tell them, look, we want to do luxury products. But we never did. They never did this. But I think they just found me a bit bizarre and interesting. And I said, okay, let's go for it. And we started with Space Invaders. And then I continued with Pac-Man, with Tetris, with Super Mario. And I was the first with Super Mario, and it just became, until Pokemon. Because then it started to go by itself. And suddenly all these companies came to us saying, oh, you're really doing cool stuff. Yeah. And people talk about it.
Especially at that price range. So
at that price range.
With
and back then, I mean, today everybody would say, yeah, video games, this brand and that brand. But back then, we were by far the first ones. And then, I'm a creative person, so I like the idea, okay, video games. And I went into contemporary art. I went to DeLorean. I went into films, Batman. And we were the first to do luxury watches with Marvel. Other brands did it in the meantime as well, but a bit more successful, a bit more expensive than we did. But I like this idea. This is what I really enjoyed with RJ back then. There was no boundaries. I said the only boundary I had, and this is the reason why I left, is that it was really working very well. It's doing very good, but it needed to be protected. And I came to that point where I felt that we should not produce too much. We should keep it on, like art pieces. We should do 1,000. Back then we were doing about 1,500 watches a year, and I said, I want to go down to 1,000. I want to decrease the offer because I don't want to do too many things. Because I felt that the market was 2015. It was a bit changing. But the owners back then said, no, we're gonna do 100 million. I was like, I don't really see that immediate. I mean, maybe in a few years. But I suggested to keep the high-end RJ and to have an entry price one. With collaborations called Project X back then, not Project 8, but Project. It was the name of the project. And they didn't want to do it, and I decided to leave because I thought that the strategy was not the right one where they were going. And somehow this concept helped me with Louis Eyrard because that was pretty much the concept of collaboration. I changed it obviously a little bit because I didn't want to do video games again and again. I wanted to reinvent something and give it more horological touch, and that's why we started with the watchmakers. But somehow, to a certain extent, the project was already in my mind. I already did the whole strategy of it. They didn't want it, so I just moved it somewhere else.
Honestly, when I look at Louis Eyrard, I see that these projects, like you have a project of Yoshe, stones, and then artists, which is good. So this is after RJ, you joined Louis Eyrard, or there was like.
No, I had to do a garden leave for a year because that was the deal that I don't that I don't work for anybody in the meantime. So I got a bit bored and I started to do plenty of things. Did my parachute certificate. It's the most horrible thing I ever did in my life. Jumping out, because I thought it's cool to jump out of an aircraft.
I actually thought about that for myself, but then I said, I can do it once in my life.
Well, it's good when you have somebody in tandem. Okay, when you go alone, I was like screaming in the air, I mean, I thought I was dying. But anyway, I did that.
Watches,
not watches. I had projects in the art world. I did something in the university. I was very much involved in the university. So I did a different thing, and then people started calling me for projects. Can you help us? We know that you have some experience. Can you help us to find strategies? And I said, that's actually a job. Figured out that becomes an interesting job, and I started to do my consulting company with basically based on strategy, mostly product and marketing, obviously, but also distribution. And started with Louis. One of the first was Louis, and then piling up. It's getting more and more, and I'm enjoying it. It's really interesting.
And we discussed that before we record. You now, so Rakieta, everybody, and actually we mentioned that you work with Rakieta in Russia, and it's doing really well. The catalog, thank God, we're doing really well. People are picking it up. People love the brand, the cleanness of the certain models that you're introducing. But there's a brand we spoke about. Now you work with the hottest guy. Leave Rakieta alone. The hottest independent guy that you cannot. The hottest is not the hottest like when it comes to.
I think I work with the two hottest ones in different fields.
Actually, when I said that, actually, if even in Russia.
Yeah.
So you work with Chaikin.
I started working with Chaikin also, helping them a little bit but there obviously I don't need to do a lot of strategy because they know very well, but I'm helping them with different things of re-establishing the company. We also have a project of having our own company in Switzerland. Simply because, Rakieta, we're talking about 150 people. We're talking about a 300-year-old company, and you can't transport this company.
And for Rakieta, Russia is very important.
It is very, very important. It is obviously also very important for Chaikin, but to a certain extent, people buy the artisan, his creative ideas, his crafts. It makes it a bit more transportable because the context, unfortunately, is that it is challenging in certain markets, and we have to find solutions for that, and also because the demand is just,
I know,
and he can't find anyone.
That's incredible for you.
Yeah,
that's what I like. You work like if somebody calls Timekeeper and says, "Hi, we need you to promote the limited edition by Rolex." It's the best day I will have because it's the easiest thing to do,
Yeah.
Now you're working with Chaikin, which is crazy high demand, and in Russia and outside of Russia, even in Kuwait, people ask us about it. And you're working with Rajab Rajbi also.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Recep is a dear friend, and I love what he does, and I'm in admiration. And I think for me, he is the future great. He already is, and obviously won again a prize. But for me, he is the ultimate independent watchmaker, because not only is a watchmaker, but he has a lot of sense of. He has a lot of know-how, but also a lot of sense of aesthetics, and he's just generally a good guy.
Yeah,
I mean, he's just generally a nice guy. I mean, I love nice guys, and there's not just nice guys in the industry, but he's generally a nice guy, and I appreciate him. But it's interesting because we just chatted with Max before, which you interviewed as well, and then he said, you're the guy who can do a 3-star Michelin restaurant with like leftovers. And I was like, what do you mean? I said, you always get into these brands that had problems or are difficult, and you manage to. And I said, it's true. And I said, but it's not that I choose that. It's just that somehow now it's relative. And sometimes I must say, to be working with watchmakers or brands that are really already very, very established, it's actually very nice too, because it's much more. It's much relaxeder to a certain extent.
So the last question, I don't want to take much of your time, and we're going to do another one that we got really go really deep with you. What is the brand that you want to or wish to work with?
Wish for work for? Look, I have a project by myself. I'll have a watch coming out with 2 friends end of next year. So this is something I like. I would say working for someone.
Not working with, working with. I didn't say with. For, yeah.
Working
like a
with
brand you say, okay, this watch is amazing. I can make it.
The thing is, I know this industry too well. If I would say you 1 or 2 names that I would love to work with, I would end up working for, and I'm not so sure that this is what I want. So I would say I have the chance that most of the really interesting people I can work with. First of all, through Louis, I worked with Alain Silberstein. I worked with Vianney. I have a project with Shaikin. This is everybody knows about it, so I can officially say it, but people don't know what it is and when it comes. But still, I have a project, and I can work with pretty much. I have other watchmakers I work with. I started working with contemporary artists that I really appreciate. I started working with very high-fly architects. And then obviously I can work with all the people I like. I worked with Romerick for Second, with William from Masena Lab, and so on. So I would say I have this chance to a certain extent through my consulting job to be able to work for or with very interesting brands. I can within Louis work with pretty much everyone that wants to work with me. Not that all of them want, but a lot do. And then I have my own project on the side, and I even have one very famous person that you just met not a long time ago, who also challenges me maybe to do something for him. So I mean, I'm happy. I'm pretty happy. I mean,
that's good.
Sometimes I wish that I had something that was more established, because it is startupping to a certain extent. It's building brands. It's independence. It's small. And sometimes it's frustrating because you do so much more if you have a bit more means or a bit more platforms. But then again, aside of saying that, we could do, jump much higher, I'm pretty happy with everything that I'm involved in and I do.
That's very good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
And
you too.
Your next visit should be in Kuwait.
I have to come. I promised, by the way, I just promised to Mohammed that I'm coming.
Yeah.
For sure.
Will do.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.